Hey everyone, it is Wednesday, September 30th. Today we're going to talk about choosing the best words for your narrative. So if you're at home, the first thing you need to do is go and check in on campus and don't forget to do your journal. Then let's go through and talk about choosing the best words. So when we're choosing words to describe things, we want to be concrete instead of abstract. So concrete words are tangible. These are words that you can touch, you can hear, you can taste, you can smell. They're sensory words. So they're words that deal with our five senses. So sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. We want to use sensory details, things that we can actually really see, taste, all of our senses. The reason that we want to do that is because it makes it a lot easier for our audience to understand and to imagine what you're thinking if we can give the audience things that we think they will be able to recognize immediately. So, abstract words are the opposite. These are intangible, so they're not physical, they're not things that we can readily touch or feel or smell or see. So, for example, anger is an example of an abstract word. We can't physically touch that, we can't hear that, we can't see that. However, we can hear and see the effects of anger. We can hear somebody's loud voice or their tone that they're using. We can see somebody's veins in their neck sticking out when they're angry, or their red face, or their clenched fists. Those are all examples of concrete examples of the abstract idea of anger. So when you're trying to describe something that's more abstract, like a feeling, describing the effects of it or like physical aspects of it is a better way, because then it's easier for your audience to imagine those ideas then and imagine what that person or character looks like, or imagine what that situation looks like if there are physical tangible things that we can associate with it. So another example would be like childhood. If I just said the word childhood, we all have a different idea of what comes up. We might have a different idea of age ranges. We might have a different idea of what a childhood looks like, because we all grew up differently. So childhood is definitely an abstract idea. To make it more concrete, you could give an age, you could give experiences that are typical to childhood, and those would make it a little bit more concrete. So typically, the more specific we get, the more concrete we're getting. So if you take a look at this example, at the top with the most abstract, we have produce. That could be a million things. It could be apples, it could be oranges, it could be pineapples, it could be tomatoes, it could be carrots, it could be lettuce, it could be anything. You might even mean like the produce aisle at the store. So to get a little bit more specific, we could do fruit. More specific, apple. Brayburn apple. The Brayburn apple I had for breakfast. So the more specific you get, the more concrete you are going to get, the more tangible you're going to get. So sometimes when we are new writers, we end up making the mistake of being overly abstract, and that can make things really difficult for your readers to understand and for them to imagine. So let's take a look at this example. It says, when Ariel arrived at my home, she immediately began asking me to help her. At first, I was intimidated by how beautiful she was, but as she kept speaking, I could tell she was just a helpless little girl. It was then that I began feeling pity for her and decided that I could help out. So without any concrete details, we don't realize that this is a story that's taking place underwater, that Ariel's a mermaid, that the narrator is Ursula, the purple-skinned octopus, and that she lives in a cave, which kind of takes away a lot of the story. We need to have those details. So here's an example from The Maze Runner. So This paragraph is from page 1. So right away, our author gives us a bunch of concrete details. So we see he began his new life standing up, surrounded by cold darkness. That's a concrete detail. And stale, dusty air. Those are concrete details. We can imagine that. We can feel it. We can see it. Metal ground against metal. A lurching shudder shook the floor. We could easily feel and imagine those sounds. He fell down at the sudden movement and shuffled backward on his hands, drops of sweat beating on his forehead. We've all had sweat on our forehead before, so this is easily imaginable for a reader, despite the cool air. His back struck a hard metal wall, so you could imagine the feeling of a metal wall. He slid along it until he hit the corner of the room. Sinking to the floor, he pulled up his legs tight against his body, hoping his eyes would soon adjust to the darkness. With another jolt, the room jerked upward like an old lift in a mine shaft. So even though we might not have all been to an old mine shaft, I'm sure that many of us can imagine what that looks like and what that feels like and what the surroundings would be like if we were there. Harsh sounds of chains and pulleys, like the workings of an ancient steel factory. Hollow, tinny whine, and the smell like burnt oil. So these are all concrete details that you have either experienced before or that you could easily imagine because of the concrete details the Maze Runner is giving us. When you're writing your own story, if you are having issues trying to figure out what kinds of concrete details or sensory details you could include, the problem might be that you are not clearly imagining the situation yourself. So before you can get your reader to clearly understand or imagine the situation, you yourself have to clearly imagine the situation, which can be a little bit tricky. So before you start trying to add any imagery or add any sensory details, you are going to have to imagine yourself what that is going to look like. All right, let's test your understanding of this first tip. So if you are at home, you can click here to this challenge, and then there's a code, if this will go away, 0442892 to test out how you're doing with this. So hit pause on this video and go ahead and go and test out your knowledge on this Kahoot. Tip 2 is to be specific. It's not enough to just be concrete. We need to be specific. So when we refer to a word that's general, we typically mean a word that groups of possible meanings. So bird, for example. To get more specific, we could use crow, hawk, or eagle. When we refer to a word that's more specific, we are giving our readers a more particular thing to think about. Like for bird example, a sparrow is a lot different than an eagle. And so sometimes differentiating which type of bird you mean can really change the meaning of your story or of what you were trying to get across. Another example here is car, and we have sports car, and all along we're getting a little bit more specific until we have our 1967 Frosty Blue Corvette. So it could be a lot different if you were thinking about a 2010 Volkswagen Passat is a lot different than this car, and it gives us a very different meaning. So sometimes we get stuck in this thing where we feel like we have to be ultra specific all the time, and that's not true. So be selective with your details. Think about whether or not your details are going to change the meaning of your story. So does it matter if I'm imagining a sparrow or if I'm imagining an eagle? Maybe it does for your story. But if it doesn't really matter what type of bird I'm thinking about, then you don't need to be super specific. So for example, we have these two different examples. So Jack is 6'2", wears Brooks Brothers glasses, and drives a 2004 black Ford Focus. Or we have, with a finger, Jack pushed up his thick-rimmed glasses, not a care for the whirlwind of greasy hair sprouting from his head. So each of these gives us a different image, but in the first one, we're being very specific. We're telling you exactly how tall, what he's wearing, and a 2004 black Ford Focus. This, though, might be giving me a better idea of what he actually looks like than this. So think about when and where you should be specific. So the point isn't to be ultra specific about everything. Just think about which details are the most necessary. When you're trying to figure out which details are the most necessary, you might want to think about your theme that you're trying to get across. So there are a few reasons to be specific. So being specific allows the reader to imagine the story and really visualize it. And if they can't imagine the story, this can create distance with the reader. So specific details kind of add that for your reader, and it will create the possibility of implied meaning. So now that we've gone through the details, now I want you guys to go through and check your understanding of this. So if you are at home right now, you can go and use this challenge and do a little bit of trivia. Hit pause on this recording and go ahead and check that out now. The last tip I have for you is to consider connotation. So denotation is the literal dictionary definition of a word. So like table means a place that you sit at and eat dinner or put stuff on. Like that's the dictionary definition. Or another example, a rose is a thorny flower that grows on a shrub. Connotation is the suggested meaning or the emotional associations that we have with a word. So these are the words that we think of, or the things or the situations that we think of along with a word. So if we're going with rose, rose's connotations include love or romance or passion. Another example I usually give students is the definition or the difference between kill and murder. If you are thinking about a soldier who went to war, you don't usually say that they murdered somebody, you usually say that they killed somebody. Kill and murder both mean that somebody ended someone else's life. However, the connotations that we have that go with each of those words is wildly different. So typically only words that are specific will have connotations. So Dexter's cat reclined on the sunlight versus Dexter's cat, a hairless sphinx, reclined on the kitchen table. So this hairless sphinx is our specific word, and I bet that brought up this wrinkly image for you. So quick recap for this whole slideshow. First, we need to be concrete, not abstract. We need to be specific, not general. And we need to consider connotation, not just denotation. With connotation and denotation, using the wrong word could imply something else for your reader. Let's check your understanding one more time. So go and click on this challenge if you are at home, and you can go and check out your own understanding of all of connotation and we're going to be practicing all of this information a little bit more tomorrow, so make sure that you have a decent understanding of word choice, using the best details, and using sensory details. Have a good day.